The Thompson Ranch has been my home for all of my 47 years. It stretches across nearly 700 acres of rolling hills, with pine forests to the north and clear streams cutting through pastures to the south. My great-grandfather established this place back in 1923, and each generation since has worked this land, respected it, and protected it. The ranch house itself is nothing fancy: weathered cedar siding, a wide front porch with rocking chairs, and a stone chimney that sends smoke signals into the winter sky. But it is home, and it holds the memories of 4 generations of my family. Each morning begins the same way. I rise before dawn, put on my worn boots, and step outside to greet the day. The air smells of pine and earth. My border collie, Max, races circles around me as I make my way to the barn to begin morning chores. There is something deeply satisfying about ranch work, tangible results from honest effort. By mid-morning, I can look across freshly maintained fence lines, healthy cattle grazing on green pastures, and know that my hands contributed to this small piece of order in a chaotic world. For nearly a century, this land remained unchanged. The neighbors were fellow ranchers and farmers, people who understood the rhythms of rural life and respected property boundaries that were sometimes marked by nothing more than a row of old oak trees. We helped each other during branding season, shared equipment, and showed up with casseroles when someone fell ill. That was the old way, the way it had always been until Meadow Vista Estates arrived. I first noticed the surveyors about 2 years ago. Men in orange vests with tripods and measuring equipment started appearing along the eastern boundary of my property. 6 months later, the Bulldozers arrived. The Hendersons, who owned the land adjacent to mine for over 50 years, had finally sold their farm to a development company after the last of their children moved away. I could not blame them. They were in their 80s and needed the money for retirement. But watching their beautiful farmland transformed into a cookie-cutter development broke something inside me. Within a year, 200 acres of fertile farmland became 120 nearly identical homes with perfectly manicured lawns and white picket fences. The development called itself Meadow Vista Estates, though they had destroyed all the natural meadows to build it. Bright streetlights now polluted the night sky that had once revealed every star in the galaxy. The sound of coyotes was replaced by the hum of air conditioners and the occasional car alarm. I did my best to be neighborly. I waved when new residents drove past. I even attended their ridiculous neighborhood welcome barbecue, bringing a side of beef raised right here on my ranch. Some of the new people were nice enough, transplants from the city looking for a more peaceful life. But then came the Homeowners Association, and with it, the letters. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. Official letterhead read, Meadow Vista Estates Homeowners Association, in fancy script across the top. The envelope contained a formal complaint about my unsightly agricultural equipment being visible from their community walking path. I laughed and tossed it in the trash. The second letter came 2 weeks later, claiming my fence line encroached on their property by 3 feet and demanding I move it immediately. The third letter threatened legal action about the offensive odors from my cattle that were apparently disturbing their outdoor yoga sessions. Each letter became more ridiculous than the last, but when I received formal notice that my main driveway violated their community standards and must be brought into compliance immediately, I realized this was no longer just annoying. It was becoming dangerous. The driveway in question had existed since my great-grandfather first built this ranch, long before their development was even a concept. Something was very wrong here, and I had a feeling it was about to get much worse. The confrontation began on an otherwise peaceful Tuesday morning. I was repairing a section of fence when the sound of tires on gravel caught my attention. A pearl-white luxury SUV crawled up my driveway, looking utterly out of place against the rugged landscape. The vehicle came to a stop, and out stepped a woman who looked like she had just walked off the set of a reality television show about wealthy suburbanites. Her blonde hair was styled into a perfect bob. Her designer sunglasses probably cost more than a month of my cattle feed, and her crisp white blouse remained somehow pristine despite the dust. She approached with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Max gave a low growl beside me, sensing my discomfort. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked toward her, maintaining what I considered a polite but firm distance. "Good morning," I said, tipping my hat slightly. "Can I help you?" She removed her sunglasses with a practiced flourish. "I am Karen Westfield, president of the Meadow Vista Estates Homeowners Association." She did not offer to shake hands. "I have been trying to reach you through official correspondence, but you have been ignoring our notices." "I have received several letters," I replied calmly, "but they concern property that has been in my family for almost 100 years. I do not believe your association has any jurisdiction here." Her smile tightened. "That is where you are mistaken, Mr. Thompson. Your driveway access crosses what is technically common property now." She pointed toward my main entrance with manicured fingers. "The board has voted unanimously that it violates Section 7.3 of our neighborhood covenants regarding appropriate rural-to-urban transition zones." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. My driveway predated her entire development by nearly a century. "Ms. Westfield," I said slowly, "this driveway was established in 1923. Your development has been here less than 2 years. Prior use does not establish legal right-of-way according to the new zoning regulations," she countered smoothly. "Furthermore, your agricultural activities are causing distress to our residents. The smell, the noise, the unsightly equipment." She gestured vaguely toward my tractor parked near the barn. "It all drastically reduces property values in our premium development." "This is a working ranch," I said, feeling heat rise in my chest. "It was here long before your houses. Your developers knew that when they built here." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thompson, we can do this the easy way or the difficult way. The HOA has approved funds for legal action, and I should mention that several of our board members have connections with county officials." Her voice took on a threatening edge. "This can go very badly for you." I felt my jaw tighten. "Ms. Westfield, I think it is time for you to leave my property." "Very well." She slid her sunglasses back on and produced an envelope from her clipboard. "Consider this your formal notice. We are fining you $500 for unauthorized rural aesthetic in a planned community zone. Additional fines will accrue daily until you bring your property into compliance." She dropped the envelope at my feet rather than handing it to me, turned on her designer heels, and marched back to her SUV. As she drove away, dust billowing behind her vehicle, I picked up the envelope. Inside was an official-looking document with meaningless jargon and an invoice for $500. At the bottom was a warning that failure to pay would result in a lien against my property. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the formal notice in front of me, a cold cup of coffee forgotten by my hand. This was more than neighborhood bullying. It felt calculated, as if they were specifically targeting my ranch. The threat about county connections worried me. In small communities like ours, local politics could sometimes trump fairness. I needed to understand exactly what I was facing. After an hour of consideration, I reached for my phone and called Robert Jenkins, an old high school friend who now worked in the county assessor office. "Rob," I said when he answered, I need to know if there have been any changes to the property lines or easements regarding the Thompson Ranch." His answer sent a chill down my spine. "Funny you should ask. Someone from that new development has been submitting paperwork to have some historical access routes reclassified. Let me look into it and get back to you." That night, I descended into the ranch house basement with a flashlight. If there was ever a time to dig into the family archives, it was now. Somewhere in the stacks of old leather-bound ledgers and yellowed documents was the truth about this land, and I was determined to find it. The basement of the Thompson Ranch house smelled of aged paper and cedar. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight as I made my way to the far corner where generations of family records were stored in old trunks and filing cabinets. My father had always emphasized the importance of keeping these documents safe. "Land is everything," he would say, "and the paper that proves you own it is just as valuable as the soil itself." I never fully appreciated that wisdom until now. I pulled the chain on the overhead bulb, bathing the room in yellow light. The first trunk contained photographs. My great-grandfather standing proudly in front of the original farmhouse, horses hitched to plows, family gatherings on the porch. I set these aside gently. The second trunk held what I was looking for: leather-bound ledgers, land surveys rolled into tubes, and official documents in manila envelopes. Hours passed as I sorted through the materials. My back ached from hunching over the small table I had set up, but then I found something that made me forget all discomfort. It was a formal certificate with an ornate border and official seals from the State Land Office, dated 1909. The document recognized my great-grandfather, Joseph Thompson, as one of the founding members of Willow Creek County. His signature appeared alongside 6 others on the original county charter. This was interesting historical trivia, but what followed was truly astonishing. I unrolled a large, yellowed map that showed property divisions from when the county was first established. According to this document, the original Thompson land grant encompassed nearly 1/3 of what was now Willow Creek County, including the entire area where Meadow Vista Estates now stood. My fingers trembled as I uncovered more documents, deeds, transfers, and official correspondence that revealed a story lost to time. When the county was formalized, my great-grandfather had allowed portions of his original claim to be redistributed for development of the town and surrounding farms. However, significant sections were never properly transferred through legal channels. Instead, informal agreements between neighbors had governed land use for decades. I was so absorbed in my discovery that I barely heard my phone ring. It was nearly midnight when I answered a call from James Peterson, the attorney whose father and grandfather had represented my family for generations. "James," I said, my voice hoarse from the basement dust, "I need you to see something. How soon can you come by the ranch?" The next morning, James sat at my dining room table, adjusting his reading glasses as he examined document after document. His gray hair caught the sunlight streaming through the windows, giving him an almost scholarly appearance as he methodically worked through the historical evidence. "This is remarkable," he murmured, carefully turning pages of a ledger from 1923. "According to these records, the formal property transfers for many parcels of the original Thompson land were never completed. There were agreements in principle, but the legal filings were either never processed or were improperly filed." "What does that mean in practical terms?" I asked. James looked up, his expression serious. "It means you could make a legitimate claim that portions of that development were built on improperly transferred Thompson land. The developers clearly never did their due diligence researching the chain of title. This kind of historical research takes time and expertise they apparently did not invest in." A heavy feeling settled in my stomach. I do not want to force people out of their homes, James. Those residents bought their houses in good faith. No, of course not, he agreed. But this gives you powerful leverage against the HOA and the development company. Their aggressive stance against your property makes more sense now. They probably discovered these irregularities during construction and are trying to secure their position by pushing you into formal agreements that would clear the titles retroactively. I shook my head in disbelief. They are trying to bully me into giving up rights my family has held for generations. It appears so, James confirmed. And there is more you should see. These property diagrams from the assessment records show that your main driveway sits entirely on original Thompson land that was never legally transferred. Their claim that it crosses their common property is completely unfounded. As we continued examining documents, an email notification appeared on my phone. It was from the HOA, a message meant for board members that had accidentally been sent to the entire mailing list. I opened the attachment and felt my blood run cold. On my screen was an architectural plan labeled Meadow Vista Phase 2 Expansion, showing their intention to claim my main ranch driveway as their new community entrance, complete with a security gate and guardhouse. James, I said, turning the phone toward him. They are not just harassing me about the driveway, they are planning to take it. His eyes widened as he studied the plans. This changes everything. We need to document all of this immediately and prepare for what might come next. These people are clearly not above using underhanded tactics. Little did I know that the next morning would reveal just how far they were willing to go. The rumble of heavy machinery tore me from sleep just after dawn. It was a sound I knew well from years of ranch work, the distinctive growl of large diesel engines and the squeal of metal tracks on earth. But this was different. This was not the normal sound of distant construction. This was close, too close. I threw on clothes and rushed to the front window. What I saw made my heart pound against my ribs. A line of construction equipment, 8 massive yellow bulldozers and excavators, had formed a perfect barricade across my main driveway. Men in hard hats and safety vests moved around the machines, referring to blueprints and marking the groove. ND with spray paint. And there, standing off to the side with her arms crossed in triumph, was Karen Westfield. Disbelief turned quickly to anger as I grabbed my jacket and hat. Max followed at my heels as I stormed out of the house and across the yard toward the blockade. The morning air was crisp, but I barely noticed as I approached the line of machines and workers. "What is the meaning of this?" I demanded, directing my question to a man who appeared to be the foreman. "You are blocking my private driveway." The foreman, a weathered man in his 50s, looked uncomfortable. He glanced toward Karen before responding. "Just following orders, pal. HOA has permits for community expansion. We are authorized to begin site preparation today." "Let me see these permits," I said, holding out my hand. He hesitated, then briefly flashed a document that appeared official from a distance, but was never fully handed over for proper examination. "Look, I just go where they tell me. Take it up with the lady in charge." He jerked his thumb toward Karen. I turned to face her, noticing 3 more luxury vehicles pulling up along the road. Out stepped 3 men in business casual attire, the other HOA board members, I presumed. They formed a human wall beside their mechanical one, a united front against a single rancher. "Ms. Westfield," I said, working to keep my voice steady, "you are illegally blocking access to my property. These machines need to be moved immediately." Karen approached, her heels somehow navigating the uneven ground with practiced ease. "Mr. Thompson, This action is completely legal and approved by the County Planning Commission." Her voice carried the false sweetness of someone who believed they held all the power. "We have begun the process of reclaiming the community access road that your driveway has been encroaching upon." "This driveway has been the entrance to Thompson Ranch for nearly 100 years, I countered. "You have no right to block it." "We have every right," one of the board members interjected. He was tall with silver hair and an expensive watch that caught the morning sun. "The plans for Phase 2 of Meadow Vista Estates have been approved, and this roadway falls within our development boundaries." I looked from face to face, seeing nothing but smug confidence. "My livestock need feed. I have deliveries scheduled. You cannot trap me on my own property." "This can all go away today," Karen announced, producing a document from her leather portfolio with a flourish. "Just sign over the disputed acreage, including the driveway easement, and we can all be neighbors again." She extended a pen toward me. "We are even prepared to waive the accumulated fines as a gesture of goodwill." I stared at the document without taking it. The audacity was breathtaking. "And if I refuse?" Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Then I am afraid these machines will need to remain where they are while we sort out this unfortunate situation. Safety protocols, you understand. We cannot allow unauthorized traffic through an active construction zone." The reality of my situation hit me full force. I was essentially being held hostage on my own land. My cattle would need feed within days. My elderly father, who lived in the small guest house behind the main residence, had medical appointments that could not be missed. This was no longer a boundary dispute. It was a siege. "This is illegal imprisonment," I stated flatly. "You cannot block my access." "We are simply securing our development property," Karen replied smoothly. "There is the back service road if you have an emergency." She gestured vaguely toward an overgrown track that wound through marshy ground, impassable for most vehicles and completely unsuitable for deliveries or regular use. The other board members nodded in agreement, their expressions showing not the slightest concern for the implications of their actions. They had planned this carefully, choosing a moment when they thought I would be most vulnerable. I took out my phone and began photographing the blockade, capturing images of each machine, the workers, and especially Karen and her board members. They watched without comment, apparently unconcerned about documentation of their actions. "You have made a serious mistake," I told them quietly. "This is not over." Karen's smile only widened. "The offer to sign remains open until 5 o'clock today. After that, our attorneys will proceed with more formal measures." She checked her expensive watch. "The choice is yours, Mr. Thompson." I turned and walked back toward the house, my mind racing. Once inside, I immediately called James Peterson. "They have blocked my driveway with construction equipment," I explained, my voice tight with restrained fury. "8 bulldozers, James. They are trying to force me to sign over my land." There was a moment of silence on the line. "Do not sign anything," he finally said, his voice grave, not a single page. "Remember those documents we found yesterday. It is time to use them. I will be there in 30 minutes. As I hung up the phone, I looked out the window at the yellow machines gleaming in the morning sun. Karen and her board members were still there, talking and occasionally glancing toward the house. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. My dining room transformed into a war room over the next 24 hours. Maps, documents, and photographs covered every surface as James Peterson coordinated our response with the precision of a military campaign. He had brought 2 paralegals with him, both working feverishly on laptops at the far end of the table. The family documents had been professionally scanned, cataloged, and authenticated by a historical records expert who arrived late that evening and worked through the night. "We need to document everything," James insisted as he organized our evidence. "Every interaction, every letter, every moment of this blockade. This is no longer just harassment. It is criminal imprisonment and extortion." I watched from the window as Karen, or one of her board members, maintained a constant presence beside the bulldozers, taking shifts to ensure their blockade remained in place. They had brought folding chairs and a small canopy tent, settling in for what they clearly expected to be a long standoff. "How are we going to break through this?" I asked James. "Every hour that passes, my situation gets more dire. The cattle need feed and my father needs his medication." James looked up from the documents he was reviewing. "I have filed emergency motions for injunctive relief, trespass claims, and harassment charges, but the courts move slowly, even with emergency filings. We need more immediate pressure." That afternoon, County Assessor Robert Mitchell arrived at the ranch, using the barely passable back service road that Karen had mockingly suggested I could use for emergencies. A lifelong friend of my father, Mitchell shook his head in disbelief when shown both the historical documents and photographs of the current blockade. "This is completely illegal, even if they own the land, which they absolutely do not," he stated emphatically. "The original Thompson land grant is clearly documented in county records. How the development company got approval without proper title searches is beyond me." He paused, then added more quietly, "Unless someone was paid to look the other way." A disturbing thought occurred to me. Could the HOA board members have connections to the development company? James nodded grimly. "My paralegal has been researching that angle since yesterday. Karen Westfield worked as legal counsel for Meridian Development Group 3 years ago, the same company that built Meadow Vista. 2 other board members are investors in the development company through shell corporations." The pieces fell into place. This is not just about my driveway or property lines. They are trying to push me out entirely to expand their development. "Exactly," James confirmed, "and they are using the HOA as a weapon to do it." Our next strategic move came from an unexpected source. Mark Russell, a local helicopter pilot whose father had worked on the Thompson Ranch decades ago, agreed to help document the blockade from above. His aerial photographs proved devastating. 8 massive pieces of construction equipment strategically positioned to completely isolate my property, with no legitimate construction activity taking place. Just a blockade, pure and simple. By the 3rd day of siege, James had assembled what he called our nuclear option, a comprehensive legal filing that would not only force the removal of the blockade, but potentially invalidate property titles for portions of the Meadow Vista development itself. "We do not want to displace innocent homeowners," he explained, "but this filing gives us enormous leverage. The development company and HOA are exposed to massive liability here. Once this becomes public, they will face not just us but angry residents who discover their home titles are clouded." I nodded, understanding the strategy. "So we make this public." "Precisely," James answered. "I have requested an emergency meeting of the county commission for tomorrow morning. These matters are typically handled in private sessions, but given the public safety implications of your blockade, I convinced Chairman Barnes to hold a special public hearing." He slid a document across the table toward me. "This is your statement for tomorrow. It lays out the historical facts without attacking individual homeowners. We focus our fire on the HOA leadership and development company." That evening, James managed to get a sheriff's deputy to escort a feed truck through the back service road. a temporary measure to keep my livestock fed. As we watched the truck navigate the difficult terrain, James put a hand on my shoulder. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he said confidently. They thought they were dealing with a simple rancher they could bully. They had no idea they were poking a sleeping bear with a legitimate claim to the ground under their very feet. I nodded, looking toward the blockade that had now been in place for 4 days. Karen sat in her folding chair, phone in hand, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over her head. The county meeting hall had not seen such a crowd in decades. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the corridor. Word had spread quickly about the emergency session, drawing curious residents from both the ranch community and Meadow Vista estates. Local television news cameras were positioned at the back of the room, their red recording lights glowing like eyes in the dimness. Chairman Barnes called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. "This emergency session of the Willow Creek County Commission will come to order. We are here to address the dispute between Thompson Ranch and the Meadow Vista Estates Homeowners Association, specifically regarding the blockade currently in place on Thompson Ranch Access Road." I sat beside James at a table facing the commission, our evidence organized in labeled folders before us. Across the aisle, Karen Westfield and the HOA board members huddled with their attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his clients. "Mr. Thompson," Chairman Barnes continued, "as the aggrieved party who requested this hearing, you may present your case first." I rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room upon me. Moving to the podium, I placed the authenticated historical documents on the surface before me. My voice was steady as I began. "Honorable Commissioners, I stand before you as the 4th-generation owner of Thompson Ranch. What began as a boundary dispute has escalated into something far more serious. For the past 4 days, I have been imprisoned on my own property by a blockade of construction equipment ordered by the Meadow Vista HOA. Murmurs spread through the crowd as I displayed the aerial photographs on the large projection screen. The images were damning. 8 bulldozers arranged specifically to block access, with Karen clearly visible directing operations. "This is not about community aesthetics or property values," I continued. "This is about land rights that date back to the founding of our county itself." I methodically presented the historical evidence, maps overlaid to show how the development encroached on never properly transferred Thompson land, photographs of the blockade, and copies of the threatening letters sent by the HOA. The room fell silent as the county records administrator examined the original documents. Karen attempted to interrupt. "This is ridiculous. These ancient papers have no bearing on modern zoning regulations." Chairman Barnes silenced her with a sharp rap of his gavel. "Ms. Westfield, you will have your turn to speak. Please do not interrupt again." The county records administrator looked up from his careful examination. "These documents appear to be in order," he announced, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "Based on our preliminary review, the Thompson family maintains senior rights to significant portions of this territory. The original land grant precedes all other claims." A wave of whispers swept through the audience. Reporters scribbled notes frantically, while camera operators adjusted their equipment to capture reactions. I continued with the most devastating revelation: the evidence showing that county permits were never properly obtained for portions of the Meadow Vista development due to inadequate title searches. "The development company and HOA knew about these issues," I stated, revealing the email showing their plans to seize my driveway. Rather than addressing them legally, They attempted to force me to sign away rights my family has held for generations. As I returned to my seat, the tension in the room was palpable. Karen and her attorney approached the podium, but their counterarguments sounded hollow and defensive. They spoke of modern zoning regulations and community standards, but could not address the fundamental issue of original land ownership. The mood shifted when Meadow Vista residents began to understand the implications. Their properties, purchased in good faith, now had potentially clouded titles due to the negligence of the development company and the overreach of their own HOA. After 2 hours of testimony and deliberation, Judge Williams, who had been called to the session due to its legal complexities, issued his ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I am issuing an immediate order. All equipment must be removed from the Thompson Ranch driveway within 24 hours, or sheriff deputies will impound it and assess daily fines to the HOA. Furthermore, all fines and claims against Thompson Ranch are suspended pending a full investigation into the original land grants and subsequent transfers. He fixed Karen with a stern gaze. Ms. Westfield, this court takes a very dim view of using construction equipment to blockade private property as a negotiating tactic. You are fortunate that Mr. Thompson is not pressing criminal charges at this time. As the meeting adjourned, the power dynamic had shifted completely. Karen and her board members huddled with their attorney, their faces ashen. Reporters pressed forward, shouting questions about improper development permits and HOA overreach. And throughout the room, Meadow Vista residents who had come out of curiosity now approached me with concern and apologies, many learning for the first time what had been done in their name. Outside the meeting hall, James smiled as we walked to his car. "They never knew what hit them," he said quietly. "Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places, like century-old documents in a ranch house basement." Morning light gleamed off the yellow metal as the bulldozers rumbled away one by one. Sheriff Davis stood beside me, clipboard in hand, verifying each piece of equipment as it departed. The operators avoided eye contact, keeping their gazes fixed forward as they maneuvered their machines off my property. After 5 days of siege, my driveway was finally clear again. "That is the last of them," Sheriff Davis confirmed, making a final note on his clipboard. "You should have no further problems, but call my office immediately if they return." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you for overseeing this personally. I appreciate it." "No need for thanks," he replied. The judge was crystal clear in his order. He glanced down the now empty driveway. "My dad used to buy hay from your father back in the day. Thompson Ranch has always been good to this community." As the sheriff departed, I stood at my gate for a long moment, watching the last bulldozer disappear around the bend. There was no sign of Karen or any other HOA board members. They had sent contractors to remove the equipment rather than face me themselves. The news had spread rapidly throughout the county. My phone had been ringing constantly with calls from neighbors, local business owners, and even longtime Meadow Vista residents expressing support and apologizing for the actions taken by their HOA. The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "Century-Old Land Rights Prevail: How Thompson Ranch Stood Against Corporate Bullying." What followed over the next week was a remarkable shift in community dynamics. 3 days after the county meeting, the residents of Meadow Vista Estates called an emergency association meeting of their own. The outcome was decisive. Karen Westfield and her entire board were unanimously removed from their positions. The development company now faced multiple lawsuits from homeowners concerned about their property titles. Rather than exercising my full legal right to challenge portions of the development's legitimacy, I chose a different path. Working with county officials and the new interim HOA leadership, I helped draft a reasonable agreement, formal acknowledgement of the ranch's historical boundaries, legal protections against future encroachment, and a modest compensation for the blockade's disruption to ranch operations. You could demand much more, James had advised when reviewing the settlement terms. The development company is legally vulnerable here. I do not want to punish families who bought those homes in good faith, I explained. I just want clear boundaries and respect going forward. The most satisfying outcome was not financial but cultural. Where once there had been condescension and hostility, there was now a genuine attempt at neighborly relations. Michael Chen, the newly elected HOA president, visited me personally 1 week after taking office. He was a retired professor who had moved to Meadow Vista for the rural surroundings, precisely the quality Karen had tried to eliminate. "I cannot apologize enough for what happened," he told me as we sat on my front porch. "Most of us had no idea what the previous board was doing. We moved here because we love the countryside, not despite it." Together, we established new protocols for communication between the ranch and development. The walking path along our shared boundary was renamed Thompson Heritage Trail, with small educational signs explaining the agricultural history of the area. Some residents even began volunteering during the fall harvest, curious to learn about ranch operations. As for Karen, I heard she had moved away shortly after being removed from the board. The development company quietly replaced several executives and settled out of court with the homeowners whose titles needed to be properly secured. On a warm evening 6 months after the blockade, I stood at the eastern fence line watching T. He sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and red. The silhouettes of the Meadow Vista homes were visible in the distance, windows glowing with warm light as families settled in for the evening. Max lay at my feet, gray now around his muzzle but still alert and watchful. This land had sustained my family for 4 generations. It had weathered drought, economic hardships, and now an attempted corporate takeover. Through it all, the Thompson Ranch remained steadfast, not because of stubbornness or luck, but because my ancestors had cared enough to preserve not just the land itself, but the proof of our connection to it. Some battles are fought with bulldozers and legal papers. Others are won through yellowed documents and the patient accumulation of truth. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about my great-grandfather,